Hello and welcome to The Nation. You're coming live from the Bernama News Channel studios where it is all about you. You're with me, Tamina Kauji, and almost 2 months after the stewardship of Pakatan Harapan has taken over the Malaysian government, it is pretty much a new Malaysia with not just the government but also Malaysians looking forward to having the rule of law established as well as carriage of justice and a more ethical and caring society coming into reality for all Malaysians. So with that in mind, today we turn our focus to human rights and in particular the UN Convention Against Torture with our special studio guest, Mr. Hani Abdul Wahab, who's in the studio with us, and he's here all the way from Tunisia actually to tell us a little bit more about the global perspective on humanitarian rights as well as how Malaysia could fit into the bigger picture according to best practices. So, Mr. Hani, how are you today?
Fine, thanks. Thank you for your invitation.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Hani, thanks so much for taking the time. First and foremost, let's kick it off with speaking a little bit about the recent International Day in support of victims of torture. So this occurred on 26th of June, and you were actually attending the annual meeting in Geneva. What were some of the most important points which were discussed at this annual meeting?
The message of this annual day, annual meeting, is to support victims of torture and to make all our policies globally, regionally, but also locally at the national ground, victim-oriented. We need to support victims to seek redress and rehabilitation. And also after this crisis, we see now repression, torture, migration crisis, detention, death in custody. We need also to look to these victims as human beings and to respect their dignity.
Absolutely. Now, when we speak about the Malaysian example in particular, Mr. Hani, so Malaysia with its porous borders has always received a high number of migrants, be they economic, political or otherwise. And with regards to Malaysians themselves, some Home Ministry statistics between 2002 and 2016 actually record roughly 260 deaths in police custody. Only about 62 of these cases were reported to the media. So this being where Malaysia stands currently, can you tell us a little bit more about UNCAT in a nutshell? What does it hope that not just Malaysia, but all other countries globally will also be doing to address the epidemic of custodial deaths?
Yeah. The Convention Against Torture was adopted on 1984 and entered in force on 1987, 26th of June 1987. For this reason, we have this day to support victims of torture. And the main purpose of the convention is to prohibit torture, but also to prevent torture and any kind of inhuman, cruel or degrading treatment. Because torture is preventable. We can prevent torture. We can prevent ill treatment. We can prevent this kind of death in custody, misconduct, and other wrong treatment and behavior and punishment also. And for this reason, 5 countries come to launch a CTI initiative, Convention Against Torture initiative, to reach the universal ratification by 2024 in order to commemorate our 40th anniversary with the global universal ratification. And Malaysia still not ratifying the convention, and I think for this reason it is very important for the government now. I see that there are very good political will at the high level. In the manifesto of the new ruling party, they put on paragraph 26 and 27 the question of human rights record of Malaysia to be recognized globally. To be recognized globally, it means that you need some homework internally to ratify. With the ratification, Malaysia can have these international standards, because the convention, in the proposal of the convention, the purpose of the convention is to prohibit torture, but also to criminalize torture, to sentence also, to prosecute any criminals, and also to prevent torture, to review the techniques of interrogation, techniques also of detention in detention center, in order to provide to the state agency, to law enforcement agency, any measures and other techniques to protect the society against the crime. This is the duty of the state, but also to do it with a torture-free manner, respecting the dignity of these people. Even they are criminal, you need to respect their dignity.
Absolutely. Now, I think what UNCAT has, from the sounds of it, just is an extremely comprehensive policy, which is addressing not just the statistics, but also wanting to prevent any future, happenstances from occurring. Now, when we speak about torture itself, let's go back to the question of crime. Now, the perspective often is quite wrongly and erroneously that torture is an effective ally in helping to solve crime. What is UNCAT's perspective on this, Mr. Hani?
UNCAT's perspective is we need to be careful about the fight against crime. This is the duty of the state, the obligation of the state to protect the right of people. And this is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We need to protect the right of freedom, right of life of your people, right of security also of your people. But you need to do it in the very careful manner, respecting the dignity of these arrested people or detained people. Why? If you treat them with a cruel manner, like in Guantanamo, for example, United States do it, you are sure that at the end of the day, after their detention, they will be Daesh, they will be terrorists. But if you treat them with respect of their humanity,
yes, human dignity,
human dignity, you are sure that at the end you can expect that they can return to the right side of the society, not to repeat the wrong things they do. And this is the function of the justice. The function of justice is to restore the dignity, the humanity. It is a restorative justice. Justice is not vengeance. It's not, you have punishment, but also you sentence people to punish them, but also the sentence condition need to be rehabilitate them to the right side, to the right thing to do after they finish their sentence, they're released. And if you treat them with cruelty, I think you lose the main function, the main purpose of your justice system. For this reason, many countries now, they use the CAT provision
as a guideline,
to reform their judicial system, their judiciary. Why? Because in CAT we have many provisions to prohibit torture, to criminalize torture, but also to prevent torture with legal fundamental safeguards. You arrest people, but you need to inform them about their rights.
That's
to
right.
respect
starting from the beginning.
Yeah, starting from the beginning. You need to give them rights to inform their relatives, to respect their fundamental human rights as human being, their human dignity, right to food, right to sleep, and the different human human rights who differentiate them from the status of animal. You need to respect their dignity.
Basic necessities. So when we speak about recidivism in particular, definitely global statistics completely support what UNCAT is saying, that if you are not treating people who are under detention or imprisonment with basic humanity, it just makes the situation worse, because they will go back to a life of crime and perhaps end up even more hardened criminals. And I think that is in particular can be seen in a lot of countries around the world today, looking at recidivism rates. Yeah. So when we speak about member states who have adopted UNCAT, can you give us some shining examples to say of countries who have very successfully helped to speed up how humanitarianly prisoners are actually treated? Which countries are those, Mr. Hani?
First of all, there are no perfect situations around the world.
Very true. Yes, we must be, aware of the realities.
Yeah. And for this reason, when Malaysia, for example, became a state party, as I hope as soon as possible, Malaysia needs to submit its initial report by the framework of 1 year after the ratification. And after this initial report, we need to receive a periodic report every 4 years. Why? Because situation change, challenges for the state change, law can change also. And the idea for the committee, we are a committee of 10 independent experts working with the guidelines of our convention, the UN human rights and humanitarian values, universal values. And we are working in the manner to help all state parties to respect their engagement. It means many state parties, when they come to the convention, we address to them many questions, but at the end of this exercise, we address recommendations to implement. There are no sense to ratify without implementation.
Absolutely. You cannot legalize something without educating and making sure the awareness
education,
happens.
Training, you need to review your techniques of investigation. And when we discuss with state party, they told us, okay, we are ready to accept, but our police sector, they need also another alternative to this torture, another torture-free techniques in order to help the society to fight against the crime.
Right.
And with our recommendation, because the committee now, we have more than 30 years of existence.
Exactly.
We are established in the first meeting on April 1988 after the entry in force of the convention, and now we have 30 years of expertise. If Malaysia becomes a state party, it means that Malaysia can benefit from this long and accumulated international standards and international good practice coming from this expert, but also from the other region of the world. It means when we see this country, the first round, the second round, the third round, I see, and I can assure you, in more than 95% the improvement of the situation of detention, even also for the security and safety of the public servant, of the
law enforcement
agency and servant themselves, because human rights protect them against mistake, against wrong thing. Because with torture you can get any information, any confession, but at 90% you will get the wrong information. It means that you took in jail the innocent person and the criminal free.
Exactly.
It means
so
this is double fault.
Yes, you highlight, I think, one of the biggest points. Now, moving from the macro, Mr. Hani, let's move into the micro. So the application of UNCAT, let's say starting with the first step, detention practices. What are some of the strongest recommendations UNCAT suggests for all countries who are not just member states, but for those who are looking to becoming member states, like Malaysia, which is currently being strongly advised, especially by a coalition of NGOs such as Suaram, Suhakam, who are encouraging the adoption. What is the first thing that police should be doing to make it better?
First one, on condition of arrest. You need to respect the right, the fundamental legal rights, the right to be to inform family, to have lawyer, etc., etc., fundamental rights. The second, you need also to present this suspected person before a judge as soon as possible, and you need to abstain.
No indefinite detention.
No indefinite detention.
That's right.
And pre-detention period. And this is a big problem in many countries around the world. This is
Malaysia
the long
included.
pre-detention term. And after, you need to fight against the overcrowding, because the overcrowding, the condition of work of the guardians, for example, of the law enforcement agent, can influence also. If they work 12 hours without good salaries, you are sure that it will do this kind of violence against detainees and prisoners. And also to fight against this phenomena of death in custody.
Yes.
You need to invest every cases in order to be sure if this is a natural disease or another case of torture, of violence, of condition of detention. But I think the main important thing for Malaysia and for all state party when they become state party is to harmonize the national law, the domestic law, with the international standards, to introduce the crime of torture in their penal code. With the definition.
Very good point. So on that note, Mr. Hani, we'll take a quick commercial break. We'll be back right after. Please do stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to The Nation. So today we have been discussing the adoption of the United Nations Convention Against Torture by Malaysia with Mr. Hani Abdul Wahab in the studios with us. So Mr. Hani, as you were saying, the next step would be to look at criminalizing torture. Now, why is this such an essential step to take for nations who want to ensure a smaller incidence of custodial death?
It is very important to criminalize torture because you send a very strong message to all law enforcement agency and agent that the prohibition of torture is absolute. No any exceptional circumstances or superior order can legitimate this wrong behavior. It is very important for a country like Malaysia, and especially when you look at the dates. Malaysia will be reviewed by the Universal Periodic Review before the United Nations Human Rights Council in next November in Geneva. And Malaysia in the last cycle on 2013 agree and accept voluntarily the recommendation made by the Human Rights Council to consider its position and to consider the ratification and of the Convention Against Torture. And the international community now is waiting
for the next step.
Next step, next
That's right.
November. And I see that the technical commission, under the responsibility of the Minister of Home Affairs, the representative of different state agencies, they do a very nice and very good job. Now they get the political will by the government, by the Minister of Home Affairs, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, by the Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir himself. And I think now the momentum is here to move and to ratify or to send a positive message. Later, Malaysia need also to review some law, some provision in order to harmonize this provision, this law, with the international standard, especially dealing with criminalization of torture, dealing also with condition of detention, and dealing also with all fundamental legal safeguards of arrest and detention.
Right. Now, when we speak about Malaysia's domestic law, there are a few particularly legal provisions which actually allow for corporal and capital punishments. Now, these are, of course, in divergence with UNICAT's principles. Now, how can Malaysia reconcile this very important, it's not a problem, but it is definitely a glaring discrepancy?
Yeah. We see that the two aspects, corporal punishment and death penalty. For corporal punishment, the Committee Against Torture consider that this kind of punishment are contrary to the purpose of the convention.
That's
and
right.
We recommend to all state parties who practice this corporal punishment to put an end and to invest in alternative measures to corporal punishment, and many states do it. And this corporal punishment comes from two heritage, I think. First one is British heritage.
That's
British
right.
tradition.
The colonial days
Colonial,
of rule.
yeah, and with this caning and whipping, etc. And the second come from the Islamic law, from the Sharia law. The purpose of the committee is that the convention and the UN human rights machinery is not against any religion, not against Islam, not against Christianity, but to respect the human dignity of all human beings. And this is also the purpose of the religions of Islam, Christianity. All religions, their main purpose is to respect the human dignity of all human beings. And you have a common language, and you need to find the common way to put an end to this corporal punishment, coming from the British colonial era or from some interpretation of Islamic law. They come from Tunisia, from Muslim country, and Tunisia we decided to abolish corporal punishment from the religious perspective on 1847.
Right.
Our Islamic scholars, in their understanding in this period, more than 160.
I think that's an amazing comparative example.
And they decide first on 1846 to abolish slavery, that all Tunisian born free on 1846, 102 years before the International Universal Declaration of Human Rights. From the Islamic perspective view, before France and United States and other Western countries. It means that you have also some interpretation inside the religious and traditional system moving now to abolish corporal punishment. And I think Indonesia need to start a constructive dialogue with our committee in order to move to change this provision. And I see in the media that the former Prime Minister perhaps can be sentenced. It depends on for 20 years jail and perhaps some caning.
That's right, exactly. So now, according to UNICAT's interpretations, what does that tell you about the general psychology of Malaysia and Malaysians?
I think there are good acceptance because you have a very vibrant and rich civil society, diversified but very rich and strong civil society. They launched this campaign, Act for CAT, for the Convention Against Torture, in order to make Malaysia torture-free nation.
And how likely do you feel, Mr. Hani, is Malaysia to become a state party to UNCAT?
I am confident because we met with different part of the society, this coalition, but also another coalition with Muslim Islamic NGOs, and we met also, I met last year with the Mufti Wilaya, and he's very positive, and he encouraged SWACAM, the National Institute for Human Rights, to continue this campaign to ratification, and he announced that there are no obstacle from his point of view as a Mufti Wilaya, as the highest religious authority, Islamic authority in the country, that there are no obstacle from his perspective to ratify the convention. It means that there are no objection and there are no conflict between the international standards and the religious value. You can go hand in hand and respect the dignity of all human beings.
Yes. So practically speaking, Mr. Hani, what would you recommend that the various Malaysian stakeholders do at this extremely important juncture to ensure that UNCAT is smoothly adopted and enforced as well?
We met with the Minister of Home Affairs, and the Minister himself, he made a good statement in this way, and also we met with Mr. Saifuddin Abdullah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I think with the help of SWACAM it was his first official meeting after his nomination, and he made a very strong message also, and commitment also to move to the ratification of the convention. But it is not a matter of the government.
Yes, it's also a matter of practical
thing, and of the society. You media, parliamentarian, we meet parliamentarian also.
Enforcement officers, for example.
For everybody.
Over the past week or so, especially last weekend, immigration authorities, customs, they have been conducting spot checks for migrant workers, and it's already been widely publicized that workers, be they legal or illegal, have been strong-armed by relevant authorities. So what is it going to take to change the perspective of the law enforcers as your strongest recommendation, Mr. Hani?
Yeah. First, we have the international standard. If you join the international standard, you can harmonize your national standard with this international standard. And after, you need to make your practice in conformity with your law, with your standard. Sometimes you need commitment from the government, but you need also amendment of law, but you need also public awareness. Via media, via civil society,
so it's sensitization.
And after, you need some monitoring system.
Very true, absolutely.
Media, you
to
do
assure
very nice
there's
your
no
work.
further abuses.
And for this, the convention itself provides an optional protocol to establish a national mechanism of prevention and international mechanism of prevention to monitor every place of detention, every place of deprivation of liberty, to control. Because you need commitment, you need law, but you need also implementation and control and monitoring. And to prevent. At the end of the day, the convention is designed to prevent torture, because torture is preventable crime.
Absolutely. I think you have hit the nail on the head with that. Mr. Hani, it's been a pleasure having you in our studios. Thank you so much.
Pleasure for me.
Absolutely. So there you have it, Mr. Hani Abdul Wahab speaking to us about Malaysia ratifying the United Nations Convention Against Torture. So let's remember, as Malaysians, only 1 in 4 custodial deaths are ever reported in the local media. Let's move towards a Malaysia which not only criminalizes but helps prevent any further such abuses against basic human rights. I'd like to leave you here with a video which is some food for thought for all of us. Thanks for joining us so far. I'm Tamina Kausji, signing off on The Nation.